Our This Week in XR podcast is sponsored by our friends at Zapper, the world's leading augmented reality platform and creative studio, with over 11 years of experience working with the world's biggest brands through Zapper Creative Studio. Zapper also has an award-winning web AR platform, ZapWorks, that lets you create your own mobile AR magic. Finally, check out their Zap Box, the most affordable mixed reality headset on the planet. Start creating AR over at zap.works or talk to them about your next AR project at zapper.com. Good morning, everybody. I'm Charlie Fink. It's Friday, January 27th, 2023. It's This Week in XR with Ted Schilowitz and Roni Abovitz. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
We have a great guest today, Michael Wolf. He's the CEO of Activate and the former COO, Ted, of your sister company, MTV.
Yes, one of the many little verticals that I live across on a daily basis.
They consult with the biggest tech and media companies in the world, helping them build new businesses and understand new technologies. So he's one of us. We'll have a great conversation with him in a few minutes, but let's get to the news. But really it was given what we've been dealing with, it's a relatively slow news week. There were two big financing events to talk about, big in the olden days, I guess, when money was real money. There's a company called Gemba, and they are a VR training company in London. And this is a model we talked about a lot in 2020, Ted, during the pandemic.
Yep.
Right? I mean, how are companies going to deal with being remote? And even today, companies are still asking, how do we reduce our carbon footprint? Can we be more virtually present? And companies have arisen, in particular, Gemba, which has had a lot of success signing up blue chip Fortune 100 companies. And they provide headsets, and they provide support, and they provide guidance. And they even now run classes, seminars where they bring in experts, and companies from all over the world, or employees of companies all over the world, participate for continuing education in things, esoteric things like supply chain, which plague almost every business. So Gemba, good on Gemba, raised some money. And we will hear more from them, I think.
Yeah, it's another classic example of simulation use case and simulation behavior, doing a study from these big companies on, where can we do cost savings? Where can we do efficiency savings? And someone goes, you can simulate all this and you don't actually have to do it in the real world, and we can save money that way. And that's obviously become a very powerful vertical that we have talked about almost ad nauseum. Like, that's a real business inside our little world of XR. Over and over and over again.
So Roni, here's a topic. I think you like this story. Dreamscape. You remember our friends at Dreamscape. They had a lot of common investors with Magic Leap, Disney, and so forth. Steven Spielberg was a prominent investor, and they were building location-based entertainment for VR. And they had a big deal with AMC, was one of their investors. I think AMC has built about 5 of these places. Dreamscape runs their flagship in Century City, and it is going just about the way that every location-based entertainment business goes, which is there's just a limited number of peak hours in the week, and they have inflexible inventory. So, math. I don't know why there are so many companies. Sandbox somehow is defying math. We're going to have them in to explain how they do that. But Dreamscape ran up against reality, right? So AMC theaters, you have to build a lot of these places to amortize the cost of new software. So AMC has built about 6, and that looks like the number that there will be.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a very special thing in very specific locations that's not going to spread out. So Walter Parks runs the company. He used to run Amblin for Steven Spielberg and produced a lot of movies with him, including pictures like Gladiator. So he's a big Hollywood guy, but he's been running this company, and he diversified it into defense, hiring, a general in Washington a retired general to go sell simulation for them. They don't talk much about that business, but obviously it's a line of business where people are buying simulation services. Mm-hmm. And they've been working with the University of Arizona to take their game, Alien Zoo, which was their first and best VR experience by far. I don't know if you have had a chance to do it, Roni, but it's a really good one. It's a Disney quality VR experience, which we really haven't seen very many of. Maybe the first Ghostbusters thing that the Void did was the other thing that came closest, but not a business. But they've said, hey, Alien Zoo, let's go to Arizona and the School of Education and try and take Alien Zoo and turn it into a biology curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked. They developed a curriculum around it. And now they've got $20 million and they're spinning it off. So it's a great pivot story. Walter Park's really smart guy, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs and investors would have been like, location-based entertainment, shouldn't be surprised. And instead, Walter said, not so fast, because some of the things we learned along the way are super leverageable. And here's proof of that. So I don't know, but I just wanted to tell this story because I think it's so cool, and I admire Walter so much. We have to get him back on the show. I think this is a pretty big news, though. And I think VR is dying to be in schools and should be part of education, but it needs to come with a curriculum. And so I think this is a great move in that direction.
Well, and this is another one of those things that I have a little personal vein of attack on, because when I was at Fox, now many years ago, I was one of the earliest sort of investor motivators that said Fox should be investing in this. The froth of the first wave of VR is important. We're going to learn from this. We're going to develop this. So we made a pretty significant investment. I spent a tremendous amount of time with Walter and the team looking at all different sort of forms and formulations of this. And just like any good producer, good producers know how to produce, and they will take what they've learned and they will keep sort of moving the chess pieces around until they can find something that works. And, it's actually starting to work now. So maybe my insights were actually,
I think it's funny, right? This company founded by the entertainment business is actually going to
it was actually
do
kind of a good
simulation
idea
for the military.
It took a long time, but it was a good idea. Yeah.
Okay, the final thing I want to talk about before we bring Michael in and think big thoughts with him is about AI. And I mean, just, BuzzFeed, mentions AI, they bump their pathetic depressed stock up 10%. And it just seems like everyone, and there are all sorts of different flavors of AI, being released, it seems like every week. So I don't know, is this the beginning, you think, of the hype cycle for AI? Or is the world changing before?
Brody, you've got to have some thoughts about this.
Let me frame it, Charlie and Ted. So Alan Turing, right? You could argue he creates an AI system, the first computing system that sort of helped us unravel the Nazi Enigma machine and win World War II. And if you read his papers, he truly believed that the machine he was building, that first sort of computing machines they were building in, I think, Beckley Park, they were conscious. And I think what's happened is like, oh, that's for math, that's for cryptography. And then you have things like, oh, Excel can do what a room full of what they used to call computers, like people like, actually a lot of women with a pencil and the IBM computer at NASA, and then your Excel spreadsheet, it could add and subtract and do all these things that used to have to do like box by box. So there's this evolution of artificial intelligence going on for decades. I think what's happening now is it's coming after writers. It's coming after painters.
Yeah.
It's coming after musicians, like where we as human beings in our sort of, I guess, narcissistic arrogance that we're untouchable by the machines we're building, using the skill and brains we have, it can't come after that. Because that's like, well, a machine could do math and do engineering and all that. So I'm weird because I've got both sides of the brain. So I saw AI flow itself into all kinds of engineering computing, but then the artists and the writers and poets, like, well, it could never enter our sanctuary. In the last year or two, it's like come in there at full speed. It's like writing essays, it's writing novels, they're not all great yet, but if you poo-poo it for 22, 23 and don't think that it's just gonna zoom past us, like there's no human on the planet that could like add numbers as fast as Excel spreadsheets.
Sure.
I think that's so. I think we should totally separate it for the listeners here. AI is not like a fad like crypto or anything else you're thinking. This is a force of nature that started before Alan Turing with like the Babbage machine, It is the underlying force of computing, and with all kinds of new layers of algorithms that it's our collective intelligence. Everything we've ever created and made, we're feeding into it. Like one of my friends put up this beautiful photograph and he said, here's the sunrise that I could take a picture of and an AI would never do. And I'm like, no, you just fed that photo into the AI.
Right.
And about 5 minutes later, I sent him something that like the AI system I'm playing with made like 50 new versions of it. So like we're kind of inside this mirrored world that we've created, and like whatever we do, anything we've ever made and continue to make, unless you're living in the woods with a tinfoil hat and off the grid completely, it is feeding this enormously intelligent machine that we're building that, you know, it doesn't have our intelligence the way we described it, in the same way that a jet does not fly like a bird. But it is this like, and by the way, it's not a single thing. I think people think like AI is this one thing. No, it's this whole plethora, whole ecosystem of things. So I think the point to make is it is absolutely not a fad. It is this, you know, any investor, any company, this thing is coming everywhere at an incredible speed, and we have no real idea what it'll do to society. We're not prepared for that yet. Anyway, that was my little
I do like your point. That's a very interesting point that I will actually be using now in some of my meetings throughout the day about when compute deals with the dull stuff that no one wants to deal with, like adding up numbers really fast and running sort of accounting, you know, spreadsheet protocols and stuff, everybody's fine with it. But when it starts to sneak into the cool shit, right? Like making movies, making videos, creating art, creating literature, suddenly that's a big challenge, right? That's a big problem, psychologically a big problem, because humans want to do cool stuff. And they're more than happy to let the dull, boring stuff be handled by the machines, right? And now we're starting to learn that, guess what? Machines can kind of do all of that stuff.
And maybe we need to put up
really
some borders, like the cool stuff that we want to do that gives us value in the world. It's gonna call into question our place and our value in the world. Like, let's say 2030, an AI system could produce like every novel in like 1 second. Yeah. And they're good, and they're not just regurgitating what was. What if they're good novels and every novel you need for the next 20 years is written in 1 second? Like what's that going to do to a writer? Like we have to carve a place for us, and it's forcing like what is our role as people on the planet. It's a little bit zen for a Friday, but
well, I think you have to think about the implications of an artist asking the questions. Right, asking questions and know how to manage these models is going to become the art form.
Yeah,
Charlie, we're surfing 50-foot waves right now with AI. The thing I don't know is what are we going to do when the waves are 5,000 feet and moving at Mach 3? Like, I'll just tell you guys one quick story. A friend of mine who's really big into AI, he unleashed the thing he built upon himself that usually is supporting millions of users. He just gave it to himself for like a weekend, and he just like swam in that like raging river, and I think he almost lost his mind. And he was tasting like what that raw power is going to feel like in a few years from now, and he was like, he just felt like he was drowning in this ocean of everything. And I thought it was a cautionary tale, like we have got to manage this stuff.
Well, I was just thinking about the player piano, right? You know, back in the day, right, where people learned to play piano, and then some kind of smart, clever guy said, you know, we can put this thing with little pins on it, and it'll actually control the keys, and it'll play itself, and the guy doesn't have to sit in front of the piano and play the same song all day long. Wow, okay, that's kind of amazing, right? But nobody said, oh my God, like the player piano is going to kind of like be the downfall of all creativity in society.
Oh, no, let me challenge you for a second. You're going to be in a meeting with all your friends at Paramount.
Yeah.
And what if in a few years from now, they're looking for a composer for a film, and composer X wants $1 million, going to take 6 months. And then composer Y took 3 seconds to make an amazing orchestration that other composer is an AI. And it's really good. And it sounds like it was recorded at Abbey Road. And then the head of Paramount could say, hey, can you add some more horns here? And like 3 seconds later, it's done.
Well, and that's a reality today. Like we do that today, right? I mean, for TV shows and things that don't have the budget to actually hire a real orchestra to do a score, they use synthesizers, and they use one guy sitting in a room for a couple of hours to create the score. So we use a version of this all the time, but there's always some degree of human interaction, some degree of humanity sort of connected to it. And what you're sort of saying is that the floodgates are getting to a point where the human interaction point is starting to become irrelevant to the equation. And that, I think, scares a lot of people.
I hate to say that, yes, and it is scary. And we got maybe on another show we'll talk about.
Yeah, we need to bring in some AI experts to straighten
experts,
us out.
Yeah, that'd be a fun show.
All right, guys. Well, let's bring in Michael and see what he has to say about this and other topics.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Michael, welcome and thanks for coming on the show. I don't know if you've met Ted and Roni before, but I have been singing your praises and talking specifically about some of the things you've been saying at Davos this week. You gave some great interviews. So anyway, nice.
Everybody knows Ted and Roni, so no introduction needed, and it's really great to join you.
Great. Well, thanks for coming on. We were at the beginning of the show, we were talking about AI. And it's sort of like we've swapped Metaverse for AI. So last year was the year of the Metaverse. This year is going to be the year of AI. And just crazy things are all happening at once. There's a tremendous amount of information. And any company, I was joking about BuzzFeed, that says the word ChatGPT gets to bump their stock up.
Well, it's not the first time. It's all the buzzwords. The buzzwords in the past were words like viral. Anybody talked about viral, or they talked about programmatic, any of those terms. I think that what's fascinating is that ChatGPT is on the minds of many people. In a lot of the places I've been recently, ChatGPT is on people's minds, but there's some other topics that are important, and one of them is the metaverse. I think that one of the things that's keeping a lot of technology CEOs awake at night is the role of China and how what's happening in China is going to shape their business. And I think the second thing is metaverse, because they're suddenly realizing that video gaming and all the activities surrounding it are taking more and more of the time of their users.
Are video games playing a big part of the entertainment media companies' strategies now? The entertainment and media companies, in many cases, are in a lot of ways they're in a different lane on video games. I think that what's most important is that the video game companies are taking more and more of consumers' time. We have people who are spending, in a lot of cases, up to 40 hours a week in video games, a level of engagement that we haven't seen before. We do have some of the companies. We have Netflix getting into the video games, but if you look across the board, we believe that practically every major video game company in the next couple of years will be owned by one of the tech platforms. And the reason is that the large amount of activity that is taking large amount of technology activity that is taking place, technology and media time inside of games, and it's among the areas where the tech companies haven't had that much of a reach. However, every one of them is building up their stack in the gaming business.
So Michael, here's a perspective for someone that works at a big, quote unquote, traditional media company that you used to work for. We had the same crossover at some point in our life, although the name has changed now. I have an interesting perspective. I'm curious if you agree with it or have a slightly different perspective, that traditional media companies have challenges and difficulties with getting in and sustaining an effort in video gaming because of the risk reward dynamics of how video games are created, the spend, the time and energy that it takes to do it, and the hit versus miss is even more severe than the traditional entertainment sphere, where we know how much to spend, we know how many things roughly are going to miss, and how many hits are going to take to make up for that and create profit. Where video games are even more skewed toward the misses are plenty, way more than traditional media, but the hits can be so enormous that they can make up. But it's hard to get to that chasm. I'm curious if you agree, disagree, have a different sense of it.
Yeah, you're correct. I mean, the video games require a different set of skills. And it is not the same system of people who know how to produce video and write. This is an entirely different group of creators. And in addition to that, there's no easy path to success. Interestingly enough, the big video game companies in the US have had very little experience in producing mobile games. So it's why you see some of the smart acquisitions. Take-Two, some of its deals recently, some of the other companies in terms of their deals have been about merging or buying mobile game companies. So I think, coming back to your point, that yes, the major media companies have not had a sustained effort, and yet video games are going to be more and more important to their world. And all you have to do is look at the hits and flops nature of the business. So you can have an opening weekend of Red Dead Redemption and it's $800 million. And so
right, that just happened with Call of Duty.
Yes. And so you over and over again, you see this, and the entertainment companies so far haven't really, they haven't really been in this business.
Yeah, we're trying. We're all, you know, most of the time, the big entertainment companies, including us, use a licensing model to generate income and lower risk threshold. But, you know, I'm one of the folks that say we should take more risk here. If we get it right, we can play in this game successfully. And it's an interesting sort of paradigm that we're dancing around right now.
Yeah, I mean, the likelihood that translating great hits from television or films into video games, that's a path that's a proven path.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the games that were created around Walking Dead. So from an outsider's point of view, your company would be smart to think about how do you build up those teams and how do you take that risk.
Yeah, we agree.
It seems like, and I know, Roni, you've given a lot of thought to this. What we're moving toward, in my view anyway, is this idea, Brett Leonard said it on this show recently, of story worlding. You know, so that's what Star Wars has turned into, right? It is a story world. You can tell many different stories in many different times in this world that was essentially built up around this film franchise. But now you can take things like Among Us, right, and put a story inside of Among Us. That might not be a great example because it's hard. That may be harder to expand than Walking Dead, because you know, Walking Dead has had such persistence in mainstream entertainment. But it seems like that it is as equally likely today that a mega franchise will be generated by a game as it will by a movie.
Well, I'll give a little shout out to Roni before Michael kicks in. Roni created an amazing story world that very few people really got a chance to experience, called Dr. Gorbots. And I will continue to try and find ways to force people to play it on a Magic Leap 1, because it is remarkable in so many ways, as a full game experience in mixed reality and a full, complete story arc with very mature, very, very evolved characters. So good on you, Roni.
Yeah, the point of story worlding, it's the large franchises have, and with many extensions, have been part of Hollywood entertainment companies for many years. The part that is new is that up until now we've told consumers, we've told people what their story is, and they think the extent to which they can more and more not just choose their own adventure, but make their own way and be part of it is different. And it's why I'm so upbeat about Metaverse, not just because of the environment that you create, but the fact that people can contribute to it and they can be part of creating their own stories. They can create the arc of those stories. I don't believe, I'm not enthusiastic because of AR and VR. I think there's going to be an upward limit in terms of the number of VR headsets will be sold. But I do believe that the amount of time people will spend in virtual worlds will increase. And it's one of the reasons when everyone talks about metaverse, and talks about it being something far away, way far off, we look at it and see you've got 300 million people already spending a great deal of time in virtual worlds. And you know, and between, when you look between Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite, World of Warcraft, you have a significant number of people, plus 300 million plus, and on average, you're spending 10 hours, on average 10 hours a month. That's extraordinary.
But Michael, question, do you think the word metaverse has become contorted and stretched to effectively mean almost any number of things right now? Because I've had this discussion with a few people. And do you think like the entertainment world's like, go get me some metaverse, like go run to the store, give me a box of milk. Like the CEO's like, I need some metaverse right now because I read about it in, you know, Variety or something. Give me that metaverse thing. And then the team is running around like a headless chicken. They probably hire you or a BCG or something and get us some metaverse. And it's like, I don't know what it is. So they show up with like, here, go do a deal with Roblox. You got your metaverse. And it's like, okay, box check. Now what I have to worry about? Do you think that's what's going on? Or do you think people are actually thinking deeply? I know way too much about this subject, but do you think people are thinking deeply about what the heck this thing really is? What does it mean? How is it not just what we've been doing for the last 20 years and calling that a different name? What is that new thing coming? Like in your world, how many people care about the new thing, or it's like the urgency to just check the box that I got my boss the metaverse and move on?
I think that they're looking at this more seriously. The analogy I would make was, if we looked at 15 years ago, every company had to appoint a chief digital officer, and yet digital, and it was almost like digital is something far off, or companies said like going to have a chief innovation officer. The reality is that many companies in the technology, internet, and media business recognize that virtual worlds, that immersive activities are going to be a very big part of their business, especially when we think about how many of the pretty much all digital behavior and daily activities that some way or another are going to take place inside of large-scale virtual games. And many of them are already taking place. Some of it comes down to like, what do you define the metaverse as? And the definition is all over the place. There are people who talk about Web3 and NFTs, and we look at this very simply as metaverse is a consumer layer, and we're going to see it on top of everything, whether shared immersive experiences. So everything from I can have an experience in Rec Room, or I can be in a World of Warcraft open game world, or I can be in NBA 2K, and I can be in a neighborhood and deal with my friends. So I think that everybody understands where this is going. There's some confusion, like, well, what are we talking about? Where is it going? When is it going to happen?
So Michael, one more add-on question. I had this very amazing fortune to work with Neil Stevenson, the guy that created the idea of the metaverse and Snow Crash. We talked about it for years when we worked together, and I advised him on Lamina 1. One of the features, the idealist of metaverse believe in is interoperability. Like I could be an NBA 2K, take my avatar and my stuff and walk into Call of Duty, then walk into Fortnite, and then walk into Angry Birds or whatever is going on through some kind of like passporting, portaling,
Universal sign-in.
Universal sign-in, and somehow my body moves from like whatever the game graphics are from one to the other. Do you see that as actually happening? Because I see very little reason why the makers of these self-contained virtual worlds, who are cash machines, want someone to take the basketball player from 2K and move that into Call of Duty and take all the gear I got for Call of Duty, move that into Fortnite. I think they like have no desire to passport each other. I think there's idealists in Europe and maybe, you know, Bay Area and some other places that are running around trying to get some capital. I'm not saying that's not what the metaverse should be, but I'm trying to figure out the economic incentive of the players who have the biggest wins, like Microsoft with its ownership of Activision and how Epic is doing. Why would they do this?
I don't think, I think that this idea of interoperability or some universal interoperability is a pipe dream. That we believe that most of the interoperability between metaverse platforms is going to take place between third-party companies and applications. So you can see, so whether it's user identity, it's not going to be one platform's user identity. It can come from multiples. In terms of payments, well, it's going to be the payments people we know about today. It's not going to be each company's payments. It's going to be it's going to be the banks, the credit card companies. It's PayPal. Social, well, it's Discord. It's Discord. It's going to be VR chat, alt space VR. It's going to be like the ones we know of, Facebook. So I think that people talk about there's going to be governance and interoperability. Not in my lifetime, or at least not in our lifetimes that we're going to see, because each one of them, it's the same thing. They want their apps, their store, their advertising, and I don't think this is going to happen soon. I think what we see an established behavior today. We have hundreds of millions of people spending time in virtual worlds. They will move into other virtual worlds, but they probably won't take everything with them.
So I mostly agree with both of you with a slight different nuance that I think you will probably agree with me once I profess it here a little bit. I believe you're both right about the way that companies work within their vertical, their profit zone, their deliverables to their customers and their shareholders. But there's another layer of what we now refer to as the metaverse, which is kind of the piping, the sort of interoperability use cases. So it's kind of like a good metaphor is there's lots of brands of cars these days, but they all effectively use the same gasoline from the gas stores to make those cars move around. And HTML in the sort of existing web is kind of like the gasoline in cars, right? It moves around. When you have electric cars, they all run off the same electricity. They may have different plugs, like a Tesla has got a different plug than a Chevy or a Ford, but it's the same electricity, right? And the metaphor of kind of where I actually see the metaverse working is a bit like in the professional world of Pixar creating USD, right? The universal scene descriptor that has now been massively adopted by our industry to allow people to interop across different use cases and provabilities, but still run their own businesses and their own profit centers. So I think that the utopian, like everything will get connected and you'll be able to move your game player from the Activision world into another world is a pipe dream and a bit ridiculous. But the underlying code base of game engines being more and more cross-platform and use cases across the advancements of the internet, essentially, what is the next HTML? We're at HTML 5, 6 now. What does HTML 8, 9, 10 look like that will allow this? I think that's actually the metaverse. I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, Ted, I think we're totally swimming in the same lane here. It's today we've got Unreal Engine, Unity. These are the platforms upon which most games are being built today, and that is the sort of common infrastructure and foundation. You want to see a similar analogy. We had platform wars in mobile, and now we end up with Android and iOS, and maybe at some point Huawei's own platform. But so that's absolutely the foundation, the plumbing, the same. The user layer, whether it's social interactions or economy or virtual ownership, unlikely to cross over. One of the good examples of this is people talk about NFTs and they're very excited. They bought their Bored Ape Yacht Club, or they have their NBA Top Shot, and they look at them and say, these are going to be something I'm going to put into an environment. And it's not clear that that's going to happen. First of all, gamers hate NFTs. because they feel that they're just like cheat codes. Second of all, it's once again, none of these platforms is going to necessarily want you to put in your NFT that you bought from somebody else. I mean, some of the applications, maybe a sports trading card, something that's related towards prestige, but not being traded. So I think we're in agreement.
Yeah.
Plumbing, absolutely. Infrastructure, foundation, architecture, yes. The rest from a consumer layer, third-party applications.
You're telling me I can't sneak my Beanie Baby into my Red Dead Redemption game? That's not going to happen. I'm very disappointed.
You're not going to wear your Call of Duty fatigues into World of Warcraft.
Exactly. Not anytime soon. Right.
So,
No.
sorry.
Go ahead.
So I was going to change the subject slightly because I mentioned I had listened to a couple of interviews that you gave from Davos, and you were talking about the economy. We're watching tech companies around us sort of cutting back. I mean, 5-10%, but often in innovation areas that are, pre-revenue, right? So Microsoft cut alt space loose. They never developed a virtual economy. There's virtually no way they can make money from it. So they cut it loose. I mean, there's some talk about it existing in an enterprise concept, but they fired everybody except for 2 people. So clearly they're done subsidizing VR spaces with no economy in them. And I think that's, if you look around, that's kind of a theme, right? All of the growth-oriented moonshot stuff, I think even probably HoloLens looks like it is on the ropes, or at least something that's going to be massively downgraded in the amount of investment Microsoft is ultimately willing to make. I just think they have had a hard time selling it. Many of the industrial applications it does are handled more easily by micro displays, which cost a fraction, have no essential royalty, which you have to pay to Microsoft Cloud to even use the Microsoft HoloLens 2. So it just seems like even though there may not actually be a huge recession, we just saw fourth quarter economy numbers, certainly doesn't look like a recession, but yet we still have a lot of tech companies suddenly running scared from things they were investing in, with great fanfare over the past 3 years. So help us understand what's going on here.
Well, I mean, nothing's new in that, somebody uses a moment like this. There's that really horrible line that never let a good crisis go to waste. In this case, you can
Rahm Emanuel.
Right, exactly. You can look at a couple. You can look at a couple things. One of them is every one of these companies overshot. Every one of them overhired. They built up too much. The numbers in these that just have on the top of my head, the numbers don't necessarily show that these companies are entirely that they're in trouble or retrenching. We have, so for example, Meta, 2017 they had 25,000 employees. 2019 they had 50,000 employees. When they're done with their layoffs, they'll have 75,000 employees. They all overshot. They all overhired. They invested in a number of areas, and this is a good moment to pull back and take stock of what's going to be there. There's no doubt they all need to continue to invest. The reality is that Facebook has been hurt by cross app IDs and by Apple eliminating them. And it's the natural cadence in these tech businesses that nothing lasts forever. As a side, HoloLens, I'm not sure I agree with you, mainly because just a week ago I saw some of the latest applications that they're creating, and I think they're very compelling. And so I think that I would not be surprised if they don't continue to invest in it. I think that they're pretty astounding.
But this is that natural pendulum swing, right? That we see over and over and over again
Absolutely.
in companies' arcs, where they grow, they see opportunities, they feel like they have to invest to hold that opportunity and stake their claim in the sand. And what they realize is that they should have gone smaller, that they should have actually hired, a small number of people to work on something rather than just trying to put a huge hammer on a muscle that's not ready to be exercised yet. And I think we just see it over and over and over again. I just wonder in the halls of Meta, are anybody saying, you'd have been way better if you just hired 10 people to do this and let them kind of work on it organically and let it grow. But I guess in today's world, it's hard to do that. It's just hard.
People get obsessed. Here's one of the reasons they get obsessed about the numbers. So they say this company's investing $10 billion in reality. Well, but this other company's putting in 20 billion. Suddenly everybody, there's this race, and then you want to go out and hire people. In reality, if you look at some of the biggest successes, it's companies testing their way into success. It's exactly what you're talking about. It's a small team. It's a team that moves very quickly. It's a team that can get stuff done versus at some massive industrial scale.
Yeah. In our world, VR chat has proven over and over again that with a small team and fairly modest resources, they're able to outflank and outpace the alt spaces and the Horizon workrooms of the world over and not just once, but over and over and over again. And it's like, how come companies don't learn from that? It's interesting to me that they don't realize that there's a right way and a wrong way to grow, especially in the innovation world.
I would, Michael, love to get your opinion about Meta, specifically, right? Meta, this all Metaverse mania. I mean, Matthew and Tim Sweeney and others notwithstanding, the whole Metaverse mania really started in October of 21 with the name change of Facebook to Meta. That's what got everybody sort of into FOMO, thinking, if I don't have an email address or a website, I won't be relevant anymore. Right.
Exactly.
So it set off a year of hysteria. And it was an unstable year, right? A post-pandemic year, a year in which Apple finally lowered the boom on Facebook for not sharing revenue, which Google does and others do, but Facebook said no. And eventually they paid a very dear price. At the same time, their headset business is struggling, right? It's not growing the way it was growing the first 2 years. As you said, it may be that what we have here is a niche console business, and everybody who wants one has one. Plans for PlayStation 2 notwithstanding, it's sort of not as important as this idea of a browser-based 3D metaverse that we access with the 2D screens we're using right now. So Meta's kind of lost control of the conversation because it's no longer about VR. VR is nice to have in the metaverse, but not a requirement. So do you think all of this is going to cause Meta? I mean, they had a serious retrenchment, as a well-publicized retrenchment, yet, as you point out, something that puts them way ahead of still 2019 or 2020. So it's not as if they've significantly lowered their sales, but do you think they'll keep investing $10 billion a year? Do you think AR glasses, even Apple has now sort of pushed those off to later in this decade as something where the technology there it's just a ways away. So is Meta going to change this strategy? Do you think they'll flinch?
I think that they're going to, I doubt they're going to continue to invest at this level. And to a large extent, what they have is they've got a good quality headset for VR, and they've got software around it and games. And look, what's the most popular application? It's Beat Saber. What we see is that the great majority of the people who buy headsets are still gamers, and therefore you're going to expect, don't expect we're expecting something short around 19 million headsets overall to be sold globally this year. And that number, and I'm talking about VR, and that number probably it'll have a nice growth, about like a 20% growth over the next years, but not necessarily anything that's going to totally change the world and replace Meta's core. And so, and it's also, if you look at in the tech media businesses overall, they've always tended towards a very, very small set of winners take all. And it's not clear that that is going to be the case in terms of hardware. Everybody else is producing hardware. There's a new Sony headset that's coming out. Let's see what HTC has. I don't know what Apple's going to do with it. The speculation is it's more about augmented reality, which looks a great deal more practical. One of the ways it's more practical is it's very hard for people to spend more than 20-30 minutes, beyond 20-30 minutes in a VR headset. And so I think Meta is going to continue to do this. I don't know. I just don't know how long they continue to spend this kind of money against Metaverse versus spending the money against VR.
Can I ask a question about Michael's world? Like what he does for a living these days? Like what is your day-to-day life like? Because I think we this is what Charlie and I often do. We gloss over the obvious question. We go deep into the deep end of the pool, and all our listeners are like,
Michael seemed to like jumping in with us. So
exactly, like this guy Michael sounds really cool. Maybe we should know what he actually does, right? So
Yeah.
let me ask that.
I didn't in my introduction go far enough.
Apparently not even for me.
Okay, so it's quite simple, which is I manage Activate. We're a management consulting firm for technology, internet, and media and entertainment companies. And our firm works for many of the most important technology, internet media companies across all of the areas around growth. In a lot of cases, we're helping develop their roadmaps for growth and dealing with where they see looking around corners, looking at how they can deploy their assets. A great deal of our business is in practically helping them grow. So it's areas like customer acquisition, it's marketing, it's pricing, all of the things that they need to do. And then finally, it's helping them build new businesses. So in a lot of cases, our clients come to us and say, I need to build a new business in streaming. I want to get into a new connected fitness business. And based on our experience from a marketing and customer connectivity perspective and technology, we can help them stand up their own teams to do that.
Got it.
So it's funny. That's a great introduction for yourself, and that's all the time we have. And I know you have. I'm joking. I know you have a hard stop. We could keep you here all day. I can tell we are of one mind and could really unpeel some of these topics some more. So thank you.
We'll do it again, Charlie, Ronnie, Ted. It's always fun to have a fun conversation. We got to do it again sometime soon.
All right, that's our show, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Hi, Michael.